Hello and welcome to the inaugural EcoCast, specifically talking about disaster recovery as a service, or DRaaS or DRaaS, however you want to say it. On today's event, I'm excited that we're joined by three exciting presenters. We have Infrascale, Zerto, and BlueLock. My name is David Davis, and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Again, thanks so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us today. Before we get started with our first presenter, Infrascale, just a few housekeeping items here that I'd like to cover. The first one is if you have questions during the event, go ahead, ask them. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of each presentation, and we'll be answering your questions for each of the different presenters. Also, prizes. We have three $500 Amazon gift cards to give away. We'll be answering those after the Q&A session, with each vendor. So we'll be giving away a $500 gift card after each of the presenters. We'll be answering, or actually asking you, the audience, a few poll questions during the event. So we appreciate your participation in those. I'll be sharing the answers to most of those with you so you can see what your peers are doing in regards to disaster recovery. If you want to tweet about the event, hopefully something very nice and something about what you learned, feel free to use our hashtag for the event, DRaaS EcoCast on Twitter. And then last thing here is that a handout is available from each of the different presenters today in PDF format in the handouts section there of your GoToWebinar control panel. So make sure you check those out. Feel free to download them and share them with friends and colleagues. About the three prizes, you must be present on the event today to win. And so, we appreciate you joining us again. You will have the option, if you'd like, to make a donation to selected charities. If you're not allowed or you would just prefer to give the money to charity, that would be awesome. Otherwise, we will contact you after the event, you, the winners of the gift cards, to deliver that gift card. So again, a reminder about social media. There's the hashtag for the event. This event is presented today by Actual Tech Media, where I am a partner along with Scott D. Lowe and James Green. You can also follow me on Twitter. I am David M. Davis. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's go ahead and get started with the Disaster Recovery as a Service EcoCast, simply by talking about the disaster recovery challenge or the data protection challenge, whatever you want to call it. We know data protection and protection of our data in the enterprise is critical. We need to know where our data is. We need to know that it's safe. We need to be sure that it's absolutely protected. Because after all, our jobs are on the line and our company's success, is really on the line. If our data gets corrupted, if we have a disaster and we can't quickly recover, many companies go out of business, after that. So recently at Actual Tech Media, we did a poll. We know that disaster recovery is a key business need, and we asked 348 IT professionals out there if they have a failover solution that can protect their organization from disaster, such as hurricane, tornado, or other event that results in the loss of a data center. And almost half of the respondents out there said they do not have a solution that would allow for a recovery in the event of such a disaster. And that's pretty scary. That's just 348 organizations out there, but it's pretty scary that so many companies don't feel prepared for disasters. After all, according to IDC, and you'll find a lot of different numbers, out on the internet for this, but the cost of an outage averages $200,000, per hour. So the cost of a massive disaster is huge. And we know, so many disasters aren't just a hurricane or a flood or a tornado or a fire. So many disasters are, whoops, we deleted the entire production server LUN for our most critical database, and the backups don't work. The data's corrupt. What do we do? There's no recovery from that, perhaps. And so most disasters are really more like that instead of these massive natural disasters that we're talking about. So I ask you to think about during the event here, what's the state of disaster recovery at your company? Are you prepared? Because after all, every company needs a disaster recovery plan of some kind. And I also want you to think about, there's no perfect DR solution for every company out there. That's why we have three different, sponsors, three different vendors on the EcoCast today, and they each have, unique approaches. I'm confident you'll find solutions to your DR challenges, on this event today. And I want to point out that this isn't a competition between the different solutions here. I encourage you to find the right DR solution that's the best fit for you as an IT professional and the best fit for your company, because companies have all different needs. They're different sizes. They have different applications. They have different budgets. And so, I hope you'll learn a lot from the event today, and I hope you'll find the best solution for you. So before I introduce Ken from InfraScale, just a couple quick poll questions I'd like to ask the audience here. The first one is an easy one, hopefully, and that is, what's the size of your company, number of employees out there? Yeah, it's interesting to see, when in the next question, when we ask about, the state of your disaster recovery plan, is it small companies? Is it large companies who do or, don't have disaster recovery plans in place? So I appreciate you voting in that poll. Looks like the majority of the audience has voted. Let me go ahead and close the results. And as you can see, we've got a good variety of companies here on the event. A lot of big companies, 56% have 1,500 employees or greater. Second question here is, which hypervisor are you using in the data center? And I think I can, put some money, put a good bet down on what that's going to be, or at least the majority of them out there, but sometimes I get surprised. So it looks like most people have voted. Let me go ahead and share the results. And as you can see, 89% using VMware vSphere, 21% Hyper-V, 7% KVM, and 7% other hypervisors. So thanks for participating in those. We'll have a few more questions. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, Mr. Ken Shaw, founder and CEO of InfraScale. Let me give Ken control so he can share his screen.
Terrific. Thanks for that introduction.
There you go.
Terrific. All right. Cool. We did it. Well, good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. Thanks for your attention today. We're excited to be here at the EcoCast. We've been working with Actual Tech Media for a while, and they're great guys, so today should be a good event. I'm going to be talking about DRaaS and what we call the failover revolution. There's a lot of changes underway in this industry, in this space. And so here's sort of the agenda of my presentation. First thing we're going to talk about are key DR trends, what we're seeing in the industry. After that, we're going to talk about the do's and don'ts of disaster recovery. And then after that, we'll talk specifically about what's the InfraScale different. What is it that really makes InfraScale stand apart? All right, so let's dive into the meat of this. Our mission at InfraScale is to eradicate downtime. The computing industry has been very quick to develop, ways for us to create more content and really rely on systems. But the industry has been really slow to develop ways to protect that data and keep those systems up. We think about the DR industry right now as very similar to what the CRM industry looked like back in the year 2000. If you think about CRM back then, it was enterprise software that really only the largest of companies could afford. It was a six-figure purchase. It took 6 months to implement. And at the end of the day, most people were really unhappy with their CRM implementation. Salesforce came along and said that, hey, there's this thing called the cloud, although back then we weren't calling it the cloud. And we can use this to make CRM simple, on-demand, scalable, and almost instantaneously available, deploy in 24 hours. And it's that exact narrative that we're bringing to disaster recovery and DR as a service. Many companies are frustrated with the solutions they've got today. They've cost a lot of money. They take a lot of time to implement. And as we saw earlier, still about half of the companies surveyed by Actual Tech Media aren't sufficiently protected. And so we want to solve that by making it cloud-based, and easy to use. So when we sort of think about the three key problems facing the industry, I've sort of canvassed these in my opening remarks, but all of us now rely on data and systems for our survival. We have a customer who came to us. They're a $200 million company in an old school industry, sort of distributing, goods. And they had an outage where they were down for a day, and it cost them $600,000 to be down for a day, right? And it was because all of their data and systems flowed through a few AIX boxes that they couldn't fail over properly, right? So we've never been more reliant upon our systems, and yet only the biggest companies can afford to put true failover in place. So part of the research we did with Actual Tech Media last year yielded a very interesting insight that 68% of the companies surveyed were using backup and recovery technology as a key part of their DR toolchain. And the truth is that backup and recovery technology makes for very poor disaster recovery. It's slow, it's not always reliable, it's a variable time operation. I'm going to dig into why, all of that is bad a little further on. But essentially, we look at the market where lots of people are using backup as poor man's disaster recovery. And then 3, the companies that do have failover in place generally only have it for a few of their systems, their most mission critical systems. So they've got to pick and choose and sort of, play favorites with their infrastructure on what infrastructure they're actually going to put failover in place for. Now, the problem with picking and choosing is that you're generally going to be lucky or wrong, right? So it's not a good position to be in. Our solution is to use the cloud, and so Infrascale offers a cloud-backed DR as a service solution, or DRaaS. We focus on mid-sized organizations, and we guarantee that we can bring back your entire network in 15 minutes or less at 90% less than what IBM would charge you to do that, right? So we're using the cloud to deliver breakthrough performance and disruptive pricing so that really every business can enjoy true failover for all of their systems. I'll dig more into that a little bit further on. Just pinging off some of the comments that were made in the introduction, whilst it's true that we spend a lot of our time in disaster recovery thinking about the floods and the fires and what I call sort of the biblical disasters, in reality, a lot of the failures that we experience are what I call micro failures, right? So the numbers on screen came again from that study that we did with Actual Tech Media. 55% of major outages were caused by hardware failure, 22% by human error, 18% by software failure. There's only 5% that fall into that macro disaster or biblical sort of disaster category, right? And yet the prevalence of outages is still enormous. So in that same study, we found that 91% of participants had a data center outage in the last 24 months, and 47% of them had a data center outage that year. We did this survey in late 2015. So, the state of preparedness in the industry is still really, really poor. And so why is that? Well, part of it is because of the way the technology for disaster recovery has evolved, right? It's historically always been based on the reserved infrastructure pattern. And I'm going to talk more about the reserved infrastructure pattern further on. But it's meant that you had this continuum where if you think about your recovery time on the one hand, and if you think then about your cost, there's always been this linear relationship that, for example, offsite tape backup, that's expensive, that's not very expensive, but the time to recover is very slow. And then, cloud backup is, still quite affordable, but can still have a very long time to get back up and running. Using on-premise disk, more expensive, but faster. Then you actually go to having a cold site DR solution where it's, you're going to be able to handle a macro failure, but it's still going to be quite a long time to bring your solution up. We go to warm site DR where you might have, a recovery time objective of a few hours, but boy, is it getting expensive. And then you go to fully hot site mirrored DR, which is the most expensive type of solution and can really break the bank. Ideally, what we'd have is something up in the top left of this graph, where you could have a recovery time measured in seconds or minutes, but you would have a cost profile similar to offsite tape backup. And so this is the vision that Infrascale was born with and that we've been working towards, and really giving you super fast failover, so minutes, but doing it at the price point of a traditional enterprise backup system. And so Another interesting thing is sort of dig into the mindset of folks. So, when we dig deeper and look at why people haven't implemented failover, why they haven't implemented true DR, these are the reasons that really jump out, right? About a third of people just immediately assume that it's too expensive. Quarter of folks say that, look, I just don't have the in-house IT resources to make this happen. About a quarter of folks are concerned about compatibility and complexity. So what I'm going to sort of talk about here is how these preconceptions don't have to apply anymore. There are DR solutions, particularly DRaaS solutions like ours, that solve the expensive problem, that are push button simple to use, so you don't need in-house IT, and work on all your major infrastructure, so you don't need to worry about compatibility and complexity. And so we boiled this down into sort of 5 rules, the do's and don'ts of DRaaS, or the do's and don'ts of disaster recovery. And you can think of these as kind of guidelines that you would use as you're assessing DRaaS vendors, right? And so my first point, and this is one I feel really strongly about, is make sure you avoid reserved infrastructure, right? So DR has been based around this thing, the reserved infrastructure pattern, for 30, 40 years. And so, imagine on the left here, imagine the red circle is a $50,000 Oracle box. The way that most DRaaS vendors, even today, will protect that is they will put another box of similar capability in a second location, and then they'll wire those two things together with bandwidth, people, and software. And so what started as a $50,000 solution is now a $150,000 solution when you look at the TCO to establish that sort of resiliency. Well, with the cloud these days, you just don't need to do this, right? So when I say that InfraScale is a cloud-backed, on-demand DRaaS offering, what I'm talking about is that we don't have this second box that's going to sit there and is super expensive. What we do is we map your systems, we map your network, we capture all the data, we shrink it down, we deduplicate it, encrypt it, and then we send it up to the cloud where it's sitting dormant and is costing you very, very little, until such a time as you hit the red button and so declare a disaster, at which time, in real time, we reconstruct your network, we rehydrate those servers, we inject them into hypervisors, and we boot and run them. We can do this for hundreds of VMs in less than 15 minutes, and we guarantee that, right? And it's only with the computational power of the cloud and with advances in virtualization and software-defined networking that we can do this. But big one is, when you're talking to a DRaaS vendor, really look at the total cost of ownership and look at the ratio of, if my production costs X, what is this fully redundant failover solution going to cost me? And it should just be like a 10 or 20% premium over that production box. The days of doubling your costs are behind us, and that's really terrific, for the industry. And then the second major guideline I'll throw out there, which is related to this, is avoid hardware-heavy solutions. So I call it the sort of the hardware hamster wheel, right? But we've all been through the scenario where we buy a storage array, we start pumping data to it, we fill it up, so then we have to go out and buy another storage array, rack and stack it, start sending data to it, we fill it up, and round we go. And this is, this is a life cycle that NetApp and EMC and IBM have loved, but it's a really inefficient way of doing things. And again, with the advent of modern cloud technologies, we don't need to do this anymore. So when I say avoid hardware-heavy solutions, look for software-centric DRaaS solutions, which give you the ability to spill over into the cloud, or in other words, keep a small amount of data on-premise and put the majority of the data payload out in the cloud where it can be done really inexpensively. And some folks don't realize this, but cloud storage is now substantially less expensive than on-prem disk, right? So whereas once upon a time, putting all the data out in the cloud would be crazy from a pricing standpoint, that's no longer the case. You're now actually going to save a lot of money by doing this. So your old archive data, maybe you've got to keep data for 7 years if you're regulated. You can leverage inexpensive cloud storage to do that. We have this technology we call cloud spillover. And it's really this idea that if I've got, say, a 4 terabyte on-premise magic backup box, I should be able to send that box 4 terabytes or 40 terabytes or 400 terabytes. And it should just be able to figure it out. And so our cloud spillover technology allows our appliances to then spill the data over to the cloud transparently to you and to your users, and then bring it back when you need it, right? And so look for technologies that do this. We're not the only ones who are doing this sort of intelligent workload balancing. in a hybrid cloud configuration, keeping some data on-premise for speed, and then a lot of data out in the cloud, moving it back and forth dynamically. The third one is sort of a compound point. I've entitled this like design it end to end. And what I really wanted to call it was, avoid the corner case gotchas. One of the problems with DR solutions is there are so many footnotes to their, to what they can do. So like the first one, for example, back up any device. It's not just about servers. It's not just about virtual servers, right? So we think it's really important to get a solution that will allow you to protect physical servers, virtual servers, laptops, desktops, right? Because if you can cover those four things, you're then going to cover all of the data and the systems that your organization relies upon, right? And so many DR solutions will say just focus on, like a Veeam, Veeam just laser locks in on supporting VMware, and that's really, really important. But you should then also make sure you can get a solution that also supports your physical servers and supports your laptop fleets. And related to that, another big gotcha in DR is operating system support. So again, picking on Veeam, they just support VMware, but most folks have hybrid infrastructure that is across VMware, Hyper-V. We saw in the survey earlier that folks are using multiple hypervisors, but then also goes out to Linux. There's heaps of us running workloads, with Linux on Metal or Windows on Metal, right? Also Unix and AIX and some of the, the more a little bit older but very entrenched enterprise, kind of offerings like Solaris, right? So look for a vendor who can support all of these things. Here at Infrascale, what we've focused on doing is supporting VMware and Hyper-V for the hypervisors, Windows on Metal and Linux on Metal for physical servers, AIX, Solaris, HPUX in Unix land, and then of course we support Windows and Mac OS X for laptops. And so we're not the only vendor with that kind of a footprint, but seeking a vendor that's really going to help you cover all of those locations means you're not going to have gaps in your DR regime. Third one is deployment flexibility, right? So there are a lot of vendors out there who will force an appliance on you, right? We don't believe in that. So with us, you can deploy us as a physical appliance, a virtual appliance, or just straight software. And I think that's important. Look, it may be, racking and stacking appliances may be totally fine in your environment, but I think understanding the deployment requirements of your DR vendor is pretty key. This next one, cloud flexibility. One of the big hidden gotchas in the cloud industry is that vendors will lock you into their own cloud, right? And that's just a new form of vendor lock-in, which we want to avoid. So look for technologies that are going to run on major public cloud infrastructure. Here at Infrascale, you can use the Infrascale cloud offering, but you can also run our technology on top of Amazon, on top of Azure, and of course you can run it in a private cloud configuration on top of OpenStack or on top of VM or Hyper-V based private cloud environments. So cloud flexibility, super important. Recover anything. I think this will be a common thread with what we're all talking about today, but in traditional backup-based DR regimes, what you're really recovering is data, whether it be a file or a folder or a disk. But what you want to be able to recover is a running system, right? So you want to be able to press a button and get back a running system, not a file. Or even better, bring back an entire data center worth of running systems that are, inter-networked, right? And so that's really sort of the holy grail of DR is don't give me back files, don't give me back data, give me back my running network, please. Oh, but I still want to be able to drill down and recover an individual file. So with us, you can recover the full system, you can recover your entire data center, you can drill down and recover a disk or a folder, even a file, and as an administrator, you can do that from your iPad, which is pretty cool. Boot anywhere. We talked earlier about the difference between micro and macro failures. One of the reasons why we recommend putting one of our small appliances on-prem is it's a hyper-converged box, which will actually allow you to run a lot of servers right there on it. So for micro failures, if the motherboard on an ESX host dies, you don't want to fail over to the cloud or off to a second site. You just want to boot on-prem. So you can boot and run all of those VMs right there in the Infrascale red box, which is pretty cool. And then last thing is don't forget failback, right? A lot of people, when they're designing their DR solution, they just think about the disaster scenario. They don't think about how they're going to get their systems back into their network. And arguably, that's just as important, right? So to really make sure you think through what the failback looks like and look for vendors who make this easy for you. Point number 4, prioritize recovery and test. it's not really about the failover. It's really about bring up your applications. It's that recovery piece, right? And in the old world, think about what happens at 2 a.m. in the morning on a Saturday, and these things always happen on a Saturday. You get, and at 2 a.m., you get word that there's been there's a flood in the data center, and so all the servers are out. So what you normally do is you sort of jump out of bed, put your boots on, get in your car, drive either to that data center or to the secondary data center, and you start restoring things. That's an old school approach. Imagine instead that you roll over, grab your iPad from the nightstand, log into a web portal, find the office that's affected, and then press a couple of buttons, and then the entire network comes back up. That's what the InfraScale experience is. We're going to see a demo of it in a couple of minutes. But really, with a 4-step wizard, you can bring back your entire network from your bed without ever getting up, and do this for 200 VMs in under 15 minutes, right? We guarantee that 15 minutes. It normally takes a minute or two, right? So generally, the RTO that our customers are targeting is a minute or two. This then also makes testing your DR rig so much easier. In the olden days, we only did a full failover test once a year because it was such a pain in the butt to do. And then afterwards, we'd do a diagnosis and analyze all the things that went wrong, and then we'd spend the next 12 months mitigating those problems. Well, in this new on-demand cloud-backed vision of DR, because doing a failover is as easy as clicking a button, and because it's so inexpensive, you should be testing regularly. You should test every week, right? And so looking for vendors who can deliver push-button simplicity, full automation and orchestration, can bring back your entire network, at the push of a button. That's really the standard you should be seeking, right? This is no longer something that only the biggest companies can afford. This is now something that everybody can afford. The last one is prioritize security and encryption. In the olden days, data protection vendors would say that security and encryption was another vendor's problem. And I think this is crazy. I liken that to a bank who says, look, give us your gold, we'll store your gold. Oh, but locking it up, that's someone else's problem, right? And this is what backup vendors have been saying for 20 years. But backup and archive systems have become major targets for bad actors. If you think about some of the very high-profile breaches, like, for example, the Sony breach that happened 18 months ago, they targeted the backup and archive system because that's an aggregation point for a company's data. So you've got to look for vendors who are making security a first-class feature of their platforms. And at InfraScale, we've got our UltraSafe technology, which is a form of double-blind encryption, where basically before data leaves your premise, it's encrypted with a key that only you have. Then it goes over an encrypted tunnel to us, and we encrypt it again with a key that only we have. So that data is sitting there in 2 encryption wrappers, and you and I have got to cooperate to unwrap that data. If somebody breaks into my system, the data's garbage because they don't have your key, and if they break into your system, the data's garbage because they don't have my key. So with security, there's no silver bullet, but looking for the use of double-blind encryption is going to geometrically reduce your risk. We've also then built some other security features into our system, things like some MDM functionality that allows you to do find my laptop and wipe my laptop. So, find my iPhone and wipe my iPhone, that comes with my cell phone, but it doesn't come with my Lenovo Windows laptop, right? So we went ahead and built that into our solution because sometimes protecting data means destroying data. So that brings me to the end of sort of my buying guide. Just to recap on those 5 rules for DRaaS. Avoid the reserved infrastructure pattern, avoid hardware-heavy solutions, make sure you design your solution end-to-end and think about those edge cases. 4, look for somebody who's going to deliver push-button simplicity for you to just eliminate all of the risk and the complexity that has historically plagued DR solutions. And then number 5, take security seriously and look for a vendor that takes security seriously. So with that preamble, I'm going to plow ahead here and tell you a little bit more about InfraScale, and then we'll do a quick demo. I covered it at the top of my presentation, but I just want to reiterate. Our mission is to eradicate downtime. It's a big, bold mission, but we want to do for DR what Salesforce did for CRM. We're making it on-demand, we're making it simple, we're making it cloud-based, and we're making it affordable. And the vision that I'm relaying to you today is really becoming popular, right? We're protecting more than 1 million devices around the world and 40,000 businesses. This map shows you all of the businesses that are being protected with our technology over the last 12 months, right? And so tens of thousands of businesses around the world. because of sort of the platform we've built and what we're delivering to our customers, where we can deliver 15-minute guaranteed failover at 90% less than the incumbent vendors. Gartner named us the cool vendor for disaster recovery last year, which we were super pumped about. CRN named us one of the top 20 cloud companies to watch. It's also important to note that we work through partners. We have 1,000 partners around the world. And so if you're a partner on the line today, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you about our partner programs. If you're an end user on the line today, what's terrific about our partner network is that we've got feet on the street in every major metro on Earth. If you're in Poughkeepsie, one of our partners can be there this afternoon. If you're in Edinburgh, in Scotland, one of our partners could be there this afternoon. So now I'm just going to play this video. Hopefully this will work through the system. What you can see on, let me set this up better. Let's simulate what we do at 2 a.m. on Saturday night when the data center floods, okay? So what you're going to see me do in this video here is I'm going to pick up my iPad, I'm going to log into the InfoScale dashboard, and I'm going to bring back a network. So let me go ahead here and press play. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff, that our dashboard can do, a lot of metrics, a lot of analysis, a lot of tools. It's a very powerful tool. It comes with all the centralized monitoring and management you would need. It'll integrate with your RMM or your PSA if you're a partner. But let's go in and let's look at the failing over an office. Each of these rows here you can think about as a location, right? So generally we'll recommend putting one of the InfoScale appliances in one per location. They're thin 1U and 2U servers, a lot of flash, very highly performant, designed to be able to run up to 50 VMs right there on them. So it's like a hyper-converged box itself. But what I'm going to do here is, we're simulating this disaster. Network's down. So I'm going to go ahead and click into the cloud replica for the office in question. And what I'm going to do is, you can see all of the recovery points and all the various servers that I'm protecting. I'm going to go over here to Cloud Boot. And that's the magic technology for us, is our Cloud Boot capability. And we'll see here we've got about 20 servers across Debian and Windows, and there's a SQL Server box there. I could boot all of these, right? I could run a boot group. I can also do an automated script so that these will come up in a various sequence, but I'm just going to do a manual start on one of these servers. So I picked the latest recovery point on one of these boxes. I've then got a lot of different networking options that I can implement, everything from point-to-point VPN to RDP and SSH. We also support Direct Connect. We also support even MPLS connections into our grid. I'll set up my notification here. Normally, booting a server like this will take 60 to 90 seconds. We do everything in parallel, so if you were doing 200, it's going to do all 200 in parallel. We're not running these, it's not sequentializing these. And so what you can see there is that's already spun up the server in the cloud. So I'm now going to connect to that and just RDP into it to make sure everything's working fine. So what I've done so far from my bed again, I've brought up a server, I've now RDP'd into it, so I can do whatever I want with it. But in this case, it's an Exchange server, so I want to make sure it's got outbound internet access, so then all of my users can continue to get their email. So I'm going to go ahead here and ping Google. All right, we can ping Google, we're alive, so we've got public network access. So what you just saw me do was fail over a server, literally from a browser. And I did this, this took about 90 seconds, and I could do this for 200 machines in parallel, right, in just a few minutes. InfoScale guarantees that the entire operation will happen within 15 minutes. So this is just a wrap-up slide. So, what are we doing? We're using the cloud to eradicate downtime. We're delivering on-demand, cloud-backed DR as a service with a 15-minute failover guarantee at 90% less than the price of the major vendors. We're doing this because we really believe that every organization has the right to protect their valuable data and keep their systems up and running simply, flexibly, and affordably. And so that is my whole presentation, boys and girls. But we're going to do some Q&A now. I hope we're still okay for time. Few things on screen. You've got my Twitter handle, also my direct email address if you're interested in getting in touch with me, and my LinkedIn. In terms of next steps, really recommend getting a free eval unit. We'll send you out our cloud failover system for free, so you can use it in your, in your environment. You could also use our virtual appliance solutions. You don't need any hardware. Come and join one of our webinars. We'll send a pizza pie out to your office and you can do a lunch and learn. Or you can jump on, just in general on Twitter, the hashtag DRaaS is a great place to tweet. We have a hashtag for today's EcoCast. It's hashtag DRaaS EcoCast. And you can also email us at team@infrascale.com. So lots of ways to get in touch, lots of ways to get your hands on the technology and really see this for yourself, which is the best way to, to learn about new technologies like this. So with that, let me pass it back over to the actual Tech Media guys now for Q&A.
Excellent presentation. Thanks so much, Ken. Yeah, we do have quite a few questions here from the audience for you. So we've got a few minutes for Q&A. So let's see. The first one here is about the initial, replication of the data. How, I'm sure that varies with how much data you have, but I mean, is there some way to control that? And how long does that typically take?
Yeah. So firstly, if you've got a lot of data, what we'll generally recommend is we'll send out to you a physical appliance that all the data will go onto, be compressed, and then you FedEx that back to us, right? So we've done that for, we can do that for petabytes of data. So if it's a lot of data, that's the recommended approach. You can't beat the bandwidth of a truck, interestingly. But for small amounts of data, you do it over the wire. When I say small amounts of data, terabytes is fine. We do a lot of deduplication and compression, and we're doing a lot of over-the-wire dedupe as well. So we can really shrink that data payload down. Typically in virtualized environments, we're going to get a 90% reduction in data payload. So if you've got 100 terabytes of VMs, we're going to shrink that down to 8, 9, or 10 TBs to actually send over the wire.
Okay, great. And there's a question that just came in here about the evaluation unit. What's roughly how long do they have to test it out?
Oh, there's no hard and fast limit on it. Most of our, most people who will use our eval unit will play with it for a few weeks and then generally move to production, right? So it's generally pretty quick. I'm sure there are some T's and C's deep inside our company that says you can't have it for more than X months, but it's really a simple and easy solution to deploy and use, and we'll work with you to make sure you've got as much time as you need to bang on it. Okay,
great. What about the RTO and RPO? They're asking what kind of RPO and RTO can you support?
Yeah, so what we recommend for most organizations is a 15-minute RTO and RPO, but you can dial that down as low as your network will support. So if you've got a fast enough link, you could dial that down to like a 2-minute, RPO. Your RTO, like I said, it's normally going to be like 60 to 90 seconds before you're back up and running. And so we guarantee 15 minutes, but 90% of the time it's like 60 seconds or 90 seconds to be back up. So that's all highly configurable. And the main variable there is, if you've got a solid internet connection.
Okay. And they're asking here, just to clarify, with InfraScale, the data is stored in the InfraScale cloud. Is that correct? They don't need a secondary data center.
They absolutely do not need a secondary data center. That's one of the big things we're trying to make obsolete. It doesn't have to be the InfraScale cloud. It could be Amazon. It could be Azure. It could be, it can be Google. So we support all of the major public clouds. We also then have our own network of data centers that customers can leverage if they want to.
Okay. So they're asking here about control over the data center. Do the customers have any control over where the data is kept?
Absolutely. Yeah, complete choice. So we've got some customers who want it outside of America. We've got some customers who want it only inside of America. It's all very configurable and transparent, and users are totally in control of that. We have some customers who are like, look, I just want your software and I'm going to go and set this up myself. Thank you very much. And you can do that too.
Right. Cool. Another question here is about the cost or the pricing. What's the pricing structure?
Yeah, so it's not priced per socket or per VM. It's very inexpensive pricing. It's based on data volume. So right now we've got a promotion going where I think it's $180 per terabyte per month for an unlimited number of hosts, unlimited number of endpoints, unlimited number of VMs. And so it's very aggressively priced. And again, we're really trying to shake things up and disrupt this industry, which hasn't had a whole lot of disruption.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the virtual appliance edition. So that's an option?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So, we've got lots of customers who already have serious hypervisors in place and would rather run our software, within that framework. So we supply both a VMware virtual appliance or a Hyper-V virtual appliance that allows you to sort of run all of this functionality from within your existing hypervisor setup.
Okay, very nice. And then what about the throttling of the data? Like if they're sending this data over a production internet circuit, do you have bandwidth throttling controls?
Yeah, there's a lot of traffic shaping functionality built into the tool, so you can control all of that. You can set different go at different speeds at different times. We've also built WAN acceleration functionality into the solution, so you don't need to buy like a Riverbed or a Silver Peak or something like that. We've actually gone and built WAN acceleration into the tool, so it's one more box you can eliminate from your rack.
Nice, nice. A question just came in here about agents. Do they install agents on the host, or how does that work?
For hypervisors, it's happening at the hypervisor level, so it's agentless, right? For physical servers, there are agents, and for laptops and desktops, there are agents as well.
Okay. And what about like specific applications? Like they're asking here about SQL databases with time-sensitive data. Um, is there any sort of application awareness or?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because when you do so, agentless versus agent-based backup is kind of a religious thing, right, in the industry. The best approach is a mix of both. So when we're, for example, dealing with like a VMware environment, we're going to work at the VMware level and we're going to hook into those APIs. You won't need to install an agent inside every VM. But we are application aware. We are still going to detect if you're running SQL Server inside one of those VMs. We're going to deal with SQL Server differently to the way we deal with Exchange or Oracle, right? So we are application aware, and we can still transparently to you, appropriately quiesce and deal with those different application stacks, within those VMs, even though we're still working at the hypervisor level.
Okay, and they're asking here specifically on that. So are they crash consistent backups or?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
vital. So
Okay.
transactionally consistent, sorry, they are not crash consistent backups. They are transactionally consistent, properly quiesced snapshots, right?
Got it.
So a lot of, some vendors who will work agentless are going to be doing crash consistent backups, and that's bad juju. That is just not a safe way to be protecting your enterprise workloads.
Right, right. Another question came in here. What about access to the cloud? Like, can you create a VPN tunnel to your cloud that you bring up, or um, is that option available?
Yep, bunch of different networking options. So, you can use TLS over public internet. You can use point-to-point VPN. You can use MPLS if you want to actually put a direct connect in or already have MPLS circuits among your environments. If you're using the Amazon cloud, you can use Amazon Direct Connect. So a lot of different options when it comes to networking, and highly flexible.
Excellent, excellent. Well, got a few more questions coming in here. We'll try to get back to those after the event, but excellent presentation, Ken. So for more information and to get their eval unit, they email team@infrascale.com. Is that right?
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much today for your presentation, Ken.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. With
Cheers
that,
now.
we're going to move to a Q&A poll here, or a poll question, I'm sorry. And then I'm going to give away a $500 gift card. So let me go ahead and launch this poll here, which is, do you have a current DR plan in place? Easy yes or no question. And while you're answering that, I'm randomly selecting a winner of a $500 Amazon gift card. Let me go ahead and share those results. And as you can see on this event, 76% have a DR plan in place. That's awesome. I'm sure there's room for improvement in many of those plans. Speaking for myself as an IT manager in the past who created numerous DR plans, they always needed revision. But and then there's 24% out there that don't have a plan in place and they're looking for all new solution and a plan on this event. So let me go ahead and announce the winner of our next gift card, or the first gift card, I should say. That is Aaron Bond. We'll be contacting you via email after the event to deliver your gift card. So congratulations. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our next presenter. Pat, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, David.
Excellent. Well, let me go ahead and give you control of the screen. And then you can show your screen. I'd like to welcome to the Disaster Recovery as a Service EcoCast today, Mr. Pat O'Day, who is the CTO of BlueLock. And Pat, I do see your slides.
All right.
All right. So take it away, Pat. Thanks for joining us.
All right. Thanks, David. Thanks, Natasha. Hello, everyone. Pat O'Day, I'm the CTO and one of the founders at BlueLock. We've actually been providing disaster recovery services in the cloud now for 10 years. We're actually going to celebrate our 10th anniversary this summer, so we're pretty excited about that. I wanted to talk to you about our clients because I think that's the best way to tell our story and really figure out if they match the scenarios that you're running into, and some of the situations that they're in might resonate with the situation that you're in today in terms of your confidence around your ability to recover. If there'd be an event, a lot of weather-related talk, but also, as you saw, the majority of events that happen aren't really related to that. So how do our clients think? Well, what they tell us is that they have to prove that their disaster recovery will work. And they usually have to prove that to somebody outside of IT. So to an end customer or client of theirs that's asking, their board of directors. We've had clients come in who aren't able to get an insurance rate or a premium that they want. Obviously, regulation is increasing. A lot of that in healthcare. We'll talk about that more later, and et cetera, so on. But somebody outside of the organization is asking questions. And the plan that you might have in place or the last test that you did aren't really sufficient to pass muster when exposed to that scrutiny. Our clients demand a superior service experience, and the way they've told us that we do it is through a culture of partnership. We actually become an extension of their recovery team. So whether you have one person on your team today dedicated to recovery, or maybe it's just part of someone's job, or you have a whole squad of people, we actually become part of that team. They tend to work in industries where security around the data and a lot of times the availability application is seen as a security event. So the DR environment needs to be as secure as production or better. And I think Ken pointed out there are smarter intruders out there that know that your DR environment is probably less secure than production, so they target it explicitly. There are no new dollars in disaster recovery and backup and data protection, so you've got to get extreme value. So what we believe we do is we give you a lot more for those dollars than what you got with the solution that you have today, or maybe something that you put in, 5 or 10 years ago. Our clients also have really complex environments. The networks tend to be complex. The security requirements tend to be complex. The systems tend to be tied together with lots of application dependencies. And they're all living with the data centers that they've built over the last 10 or 15 years, which, as much as we wanted to get to 100% virtual, most people didn't get there. They got to maybe 50, 60%. So you end up with a hodgepodge of physical, virtual, modern, and even maybe some legacy systems like some IBM or Sun environments that are out there. And that all has to be protected. Our clients also are very aware that technology drives their business. So today, the stories we're going to talk about are a wealth management firm, a bank, an airline, a large law firm, an auto retailer, and a healthcare system. And so hopefully, I'm going to tease out a particular differentiating point about each story, and hopefully those things will resonate with you. The other thing that's interesting is just in the last few months, it's become more clear what they're choosing us over in terms of their alternatives. So whether it's the big traditional providers, maybe they call it the easier technology providers because you're already a VMware customer, why not use the VMware environment? We're a large VMware customer ourselves, but sometimes people think it's easy just to replicate to the cloud and go platform to platform, or more and more people are choosing to do this as a service over doing it themselves. And often this isn't the first thing their organization has done as a service. They might have gone to Office 365 already. They might have gone to Salesforce, Workday, ServiceNow, and they've gotten comfortable with that model. They know that it brings more than cost. It brings all the operational components that allows them to focus on other things. There's more value there. And then disaster recovery seems like a logical next thing to do as a service. Our solutions, we're not going to talk a lot about these today because I want you to understand how clients use our environment, but this is something we can dive into later if you have some specific interest. But we have 3 platform environments. We have an always-on environment. It's basically you can recover in minutes or seconds. It's always on, highly available. We have real-time environment, so if you need to recover in an hour or a few hours or less. And then we have more of a backup restore environment for applications that can survive being offline for a few days. And that's all about balancing the right amount of cost and value to fit the greatest solution you can put into the budget that you already have. It also helps you communicate to your business because when you explain that you have these 3 choices and the costs that are associated with that, you can help them align their application into the right bucket instead of you making a decision on their behalf that might turn out to be too expensive and people get upset about that, or maybe you try to save money and you put a business unit at more risk than they were comfortable with. Seems like IT is always getting in trouble for things like that. Now you can put the onus on the business with this approach. The other thing is that clients are raving about our customer experience. So we call this the BLX, the Blue Lock experience. And if you don't know what Net Promoter is, this is the likelihood that someone will actually refer you to someone, a trusted peer of theirs. So in other words, they're going to extend their reputation on the vendor's behalf to someone that they know and trust. And we're scoring very highly there. We're also regarded fairly highly by the analyst community. We are in the leadership or the innovators quadrant with the highest ability to execute. So what we're trying to bring is a disruptive approach to do this differently, but also by executing very highly, you know that it's going to work. One of the challenges, and you're going to hear a little bit about this today, is there's some great new technology out there. There's some tools that simply didn't exist a few years ago that make the ability to move data, secure data, recover data a lot better. And I'm excited about the Zerto presentation that you're going to hear after me. That's a big part of our solution. And it's an amazing technology. If you haven't actually taken a look at it, Josh is going to run you through it. But it's also about people and process, because no matter what you do to technology, if the people and process are not worked out or orchestrated into your solution, they could be the ones that fail down. You could have the greatest technology in the world, and if the person in charge of recovering your environment is in Cabo on vacation that week, it's not going to work. If you have a process that requires somebody to approve a database from a QA standpoint, that data is intact before you release it out to the environment, and that adds 3 hours to your RTO, obviously the fact that the technology can get it done in 15 minutes isn't going to help you. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So what do I mean when they say they have to prove it to others? So one of our clients is a major law firm. They've got over 1,000 attorneys that have to keep working no matter what happens with the systems. And as you can imagine, in the modern law firm, it's very technology driven, lots of iPads, iPhones, Android devices, laptops, all interacting with data and systems all day long. Their challenge was they needed to be able to prove this to work because one of their clients was asking. One of their clients said, hey, we depend on you guys for everything that we do. We run mergers and acquisitions, all these processes through you. And if for some reason we weren't able to get to the data, our entire world would come to a stop. So you have to prove to us that you have a solution in place that's going to work. You got to be able to offer a certified test every 6 months, et cetera, so on. So we started to walk through it with them, and this is pretty typical. What you'll see out there is people will take different tiers of data protection, just like I showed you before, and they all have different RTOs, RPOs, et cetera, so on. Let's maybe use words like this that are a little simpler to understand: mission critical, high impact applications, business supporting applications, and they'll start to break their environment down and figure out what to protect there. So as we walk through that process, we realized that they were going to set the expectation to that customer about how quickly their environment could come back based on technology. And that was going to be a huge mistake. So we educated them on two things: recovery waves and true RTO. So recovery waves and true RTO take into account not only the technology's ability to bring your environment back, but the people and process components. So if you break this out here, you can actually see, and this is Zerto for us today. Remember, this is an always-on hot environment, and this is a Zerto environment. You can see that if you have 50 or 100 applications in this tier, all protected effectively by Zerto, and you can power those up in 15 minutes or so, the people that are involved in the process to do QA, figure out network issues, open up firewalls, make sure that users know the applications are on, can't happen in 15 minutes. And by the way, that team that's busy doing that entire process is probably tied up even though the VMs are recovering in the background. So we broke this down into 2 waves. And you can see this process gets even further. So if you go back here, the original RTO for this was going to be 4 hours or less with their QA process, but the reality is it's going to be more like 8 when you stretch it out. Same thing with tier 3. This is more of a backup and recovery tier. They thought they could bring the data back in 16 hours, but this team's probably going to be beat. The processes aren't there, and they're going to be troubleshooting all these other issues that came up, bringing 50 or 100 applications back. So the true expectation they set to the business was 24 hours, even though, even on that low tier, the expectation from the technology was more like 16. And obviously it just keeps going. Things that were supposed to come back that same day, now they're saying it might take more than a day. I don't know about you, but in the middle of this process, I'm planning on sleeping after, doing 16 hours worth of work so that I can not make mistakes when I wake up and start recovering systems again. The other thing that we had to do was give them something that they could give to their client to prove that the recovery was even tested and that it worked. So there's 2 things we did. In our portal, you actually can see in real time your recovery health. You can make sure your cost is in alignment with budget. So if your environment grew, the last thing you want to happen is that your bill is just going to go up for no reason. Or if it's going to go up for a good reason because you did expand your environment, you did applications, you can communicate that to the CFO or the CEO or whoever is the right person in your organization to make sure that they know it's coming and why. And then when your last test was done and whether or not it was successful. The other thing we wanted to make sure is that they could download their latest test certificate that's actually signed off by both organizations. And that's the proof that they need to be able to give to a third party that the environment is actually going to work the way that they expected. So setting the right expectation around RTO, including people, process, and technology, and then being able to certify the solution were the key things for them to prove that it works. Our clients also demand a superior service experience. So we worked with a wealth management firm, and their issue was very similar. Their end clients were requiring them to have a DR solution. Their existing IT team was focused on growing the organization, so opening up new offices, migrating everybody to SaaS applications, and things like that. So they didn't have time to really focus on getting the DR piece done. And they had 2 months to turn the entire solution around. And again, I'm not talking about install some tools and move some data. I'm talking about the whole thing all the way to certification. So what we showed them was the recovery assurance milestones that we have. So if you look at a typical solution, at some point you're going to order it, you're going to buy it, you're going to sign something and execute a contract. And that's all the classic pieces, right? There's service levels, scope of the project, any legal that you might have to do. But the minute that's done, you get a team. And our teams range in anywhere from 3 to 10 people that are assigned to your environment to make this project work. We'll talk a little bit about the members of that team here in a minute, but they instantly went from one person who had an hour or two to focus on this a week to 3 people that were focused full-time on getting their implementation done. Through the implementation process, they got value immediately because at this point, we had a copy of all of the data. Oops, sorry. So once we have a copy of all the data, if they did have an event at that moment, they could recover. It probably won't happen in the RTO timeframe that they want, but it is possible because we've never tried it before. They've never tried it before. At this point, we've actually done the test the first time. We test twice during the implementation, and this is where we've taken everything we think about how the application should work, how the network should work, how the security should work, the QA that we think is the right process to run, and we've tried it for the first time. These are usually about 90% right. So we drive all that content into the playbook, and we take the 10% of things that didn't work, we factor them into the next test, and then we run the certified test, which you can see we actually have a 100% test certification rate on the second test. And that takes into all the exceptions and lessons learned when we tried that first initial failover. The other challenge they had was, and you guys probably understand this, some people have a person who will do project management as part of their role when they have to. Some companies have a single project manager that might want to run this whole process because you have a capability there. Other companies have project management resources, but they would really rather dedicate them to that Salesforce migration or the Office 365 migration that they're doing. So we're able to provide the whole PMO organization as part of this if that's what you need. And that's just part of what we do. It's not at an extra cost. And as you can see, we're able to either offer you the framework to use as you go through this process. Most people haven't done this before, so that's useful. Or we can operate it for you. And that's all the way from kickoff all the way into operations. We also use a RACI framework because one of the biggest issues in a collaborative project like this is who's responsible for what. So that applies not only to the implementation, but to the operations and the recovery. So this RACI chart, and the names are missing here, but you can imagine the names are over here. It actually explains who is responsible for what part of all of the entire process so that we know who's doing what. We also built a collaborative extranet. So one of the challenges we had before was a lot of people weren't sure where the project was delayed or who was supposed to do what or what documentation we were waiting on. And a lot of it was being done through email. Obviously, that wasn't going to scale. So we built this extranet, and we collaborate with your team. Sometimes it's us driving 90% of the work. Sometimes it's 50-50. Sometimes the client is running the majority of the show, and then they're just interacting with us through this when we need to share documents and work on things like the Gantt chart in terms of the timeline to make sure that we get everything done. Or if you need to come in here really quickly and show your boss the milestones and where the project's at, you can do that as well. One thing, as you can imagine, based on the types of clients that we work with, is that they require DR to be secure as production or better. So we'll talk about 2 clients here and how they looked at security. So we supported a major healthcare system, and their issue with DR was their business was hitting a tipping point around growth, and the IT just couldn't stomach the risk of having all these dependencies on their systems running the entire hospital, and particularly the ER and the neonatal unit, that not having an effective DR solution was kind of driving crazy and keeping them up at night. They also had a contract renewal coming up on their second data center location, and they didn't want to stay in the data center business, at least not for the secondary site. So they wanted an as-a-service solution. But as most of you know, because there's personally identifiable information in healthcare, there's a HIPAA regulation, and from an IT perspective, there's a more specific HIPAA regulation called HIPAA High-Tech that tells you how to protect those environments and how DR should actually work. So we did something kind of cool. As a service provider company, we have SSA Type 2 SOC 2 certification in our facilities, and we actually have one facility that's even SOC 3 certified. We actually extended that certification to include all of our HIPAA high-tech controls, because right now, HIPAA doesn't offer a certification process for the IT controls that are in there. So we thought, well, what we really need is proof and evidence around what this compliance is. Let's use the certification that everybody already trusts, and we'll just put this in as an addendum. And it worked wonderfully. So you can't see it here, but there's 7 pages of HIPAA high-tech controls that are actually certified by our third-party accounting firm. We also worked with a major regional bank. Their issue was really fascinating to me because their application was fairly small, but it was their main website. And they realized that everybody came to their website in order to get to their online banking, which was actually run by a third party. So if the website had an issue, if it was hacked, if it was defaced, if it was offline, everybody thought the bank and all the banking systems were wiped out, which wasn't true. So they needed a DR solution that was secure, but also high RTO that could keep that confidence high amongst their customer base as they transition through the website to the third-party hosted banking environment. They didn't really have a set of IT controls from an audit standpoint, so they decided, hey, HIPAA high-tech is actually pretty solid. You've already got it audited. We're not in healthcare, but we think our data is pretty secure and maybe even more important than what the hospitals worry about. So, because it involves money. So we're just going to leverage the HIPAA high-tech feature set. The other thing they were worried about, because it was about keeping the website online, was denial of service, data corruption, and data leakage into their environment. So we enable all those features to protect them because they are a more public-facing application than maybe what a hospital or a healthcare system might have that's mostly behind a firewall. So as I mentioned before, everybody's living within budget constraints. The world is changing, and it's not necessarily about buying something that you've already got for less money. It's about spending the same allocation you have to protect your environment, but getting a lot more value out of it. Hopefully you've already seen some ways that our clients are getting more value out of their spend, but here are a few more. So we had a Fortune 500 auto retailer. It's one of those conglomerates, I guess you could call it, where they run a lot of dealerships, even though the dealerships all have their own independent names in your market. Their issue was they were starting to grow a lot based on revenue, and they were going to be the first company to actually sell cars online. So if you think about CarMax today, you can shop for cars online, but you can't actually execute the sale. These guys are going to make that happen. So as they started to think about what that meant when literally technology was going to be supporting this small at the beginning, but potentially half of their revenue in the future, their definition of RTO and DR became quite a bit different. They wanted to be in a secure environment. Our Las Vegas data center is actually based in the Switch SuperNAP. If you guys are familiar with that, it's the only Tier 4 gold rated data center facility in the world. So they were already going to put an investment there, and they really wanted to control their security and their network front end. They had a pretty extensive capability there. They had a team that was really comfortable with that, but they wanted the back end to be run by a DR service provider. So what you can see here is they actually put their entire network front end and their MPLS network is attached to our cloud service in the Switch SuperNAP data center. So they got the best of both worlds. They got all the as a service, only pay for what you use, everything that we talked about before. But when it came to the pieces that they really want to have total control over and really not spend more money on, we were able to take care of that as well. What you'll hear from us is a lot of our solutions incorporate Zerto, but in some cases, we'll talk about one here in just a minute, where they had an application that wasn't virtual, so we had to protect it using another tool. But that's our whole goal is to meet our clients where they are, knowing that there are a lot of things in their data center and their architecture that they can't change, but provide them a path to the future so that as they're ready or as more applications can embrace it, they can keep going. The other thing is we wanted to make sure that these folks could always see what their status was, and as I mentioned before, keep an eye on their cost. So if you want to know exactly how much an application's costing, let's say you've got to stay under a fixed budget, you've got a line of business application that maybe you spent some money on to protect at the beginning, you've got a mission critical application you might want to spend a little bit more money on, your ability to slice and dice and move that around. You can see kind of in the middle here, we've got a portal that does all of that for you. So final thing here is our customers tend to have really complex environments. So virtual, physical, modern, legacy systems, and a lot of times they're tied together. So as much as they might say, I would love to just install one tool to replicate my VM somewhere else, they can't protect their environment with just that approach. So as I mentioned before, we use Zerto a lot. In certain situations, though, it won't necessarily protect the environment. So that's what we had. So we had an airline that we serve today, and they actually have a system. It's almost all virtual. We protected all of that with Zerto. And then we had this one system that it turns out has to check with the TSA no-fly list, compare that to the passenger manifest when a plane's door is closed, and if they get a hit on the no-flight list, then the planes can't take off. So that's a pretty important freaking system. It just happened to be physical and, you know, running on a non-VM. The other issue was that if that system wasn't able to talk to the TSA database, none of the planes could go in the air. So it became really important. So they had all these VMs and Windows systems that sort of surrounded it and made it work, but this system was actually based on a pervasive database, which if I'll date myself, but you know, back in the network days, it was called Btrieve. It's been around forever. And it works in a certain way. It doesn't understand block level replication, doesn't understand transaction integrity, and it has a real issue with how the services have to start up after the fact. So we actually went in and protected that one system with double take, even though 90% of the rest of the environment was protected with Zerto, and we put it all behind the same control panel that you see today. The other thing that they were worried about was the testing. So in their environment, they had to have really clear testing. So we took our project management team, and they needed to be able to go back to their executives and prove that if this no-fly system was ever in jeopardy, that they knew what the risk was, but also when the next test was going to go on, because oftentimes, even though we can test anytime, we test for tons of people every week, the real issue is they've got to start planning so that their team has time several weeks, if not months, in advance. So we have this master schedule that we expose with them to figure that out. The other thing is, if you look at that system, the pervasive database, it's one thing to install another technology and just make it replicate, but the real issue is how do you operate it like everything else? How do you take this kind of foreign system and run it as if it was normal? So we actually have what we call the tailored service process. Anytime we run into an environment that's complex, this is what we run into. You guys will never see it. We're just going to ask you questions, but this is what happens on the back end. It then becomes a tailored service that has a number. We've actually done 17 of these in the last 3 months, and they're all tracked inside of a system here. So you can see we've got all kinds of things. We've got Oracle appliances, MySQL database monitoring, got the pervasive database. Somebody wanted us to manage part of their backup environment as part of the solution to transition them into the future, things like that. That's all cool, right? Anybody can sort of document, and maybe some people call it custom and whatnot. But the reality is translating that into the order of operations of the environment so that you know what to do when there's actually an event. So we're able to take all that complex data because we run it as an application and drive it into the recovery playbook. So you can see here, they've actually got the Zerto environment and the double take environment are all identified in the same playbook, and we run through the whole order of operations on their behalf to get that done. So I know I covered a lot of ground, but hopefully what you took away from the session today is that our clients in particular, and this may not fit everybody, have to prove that it works to somebody else, customers, boards, insurers, regulators, executives, require it to be secure, as production or better, need extreme value because the budget around DR is not getting any bigger, demand a superior service experience, and really a culture of partnership and collaboration because we do become part of your IT team, and that their environments are complex. They're working with the data center they have. They may dream and want to get to a different place that's a lot easier to work with, but the reality is we need to meet you with where you are now.
Excellent presentation, Pat. Are you ready for some Q&A from the audience?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. So we've got quite a few questions coming in. If you haven't asked a question yet and you have something on your mind, now's the time to put it in the GoToWebinar Q&A box there, and I'll be queuing up these questions for Pat. So, Pat, for one thing I got from your presentation is that BlueLock has a lot of different service offerings. It's not just we replicate virtual machines. It's not just you buy infrastructure and put it in our data center. Can you kind of tell us what are the different service offerings, or is it very custom? Is it tailor-made to the needs of your customers?
That's a great question, David. So what we call it internally is tailored on standard. So obviously it's to our benefit to operate these environments with confidence, and also to provide cost and value and call it seamless integration, the more standard these things are. But we also realize that every data center we run into has a complex requirement that may not match the clients that we've served before. And I'd love to tell you that in 3 years, I predict that we'll have 90% of that attack surface covered, and that everything we see will have seen 10 times before. But the reality is doing this as a service with a cloud-based environment and working with data centers that were really designed to just run inside their own firewalls over the last 10 years, we've got to be flexible. But our goal is to be flexible, take in what you've got. If we can upgrade you to something more modern and you have room in your priority list and your budget to do that, we're with you. Most people have, call it 60–80% modern systems, but they're dealing with a lot of things that they can't necessarily change, at least not in the same time frame in which they need to improve their availability strategy.
Right, gotcha. So, I mean, in my mind, I kind of equate it almost to like you're looking to buy a new house to move into for your family. You don't just go out and say, I want to buy a house, and you buy a house off the shelf. I mean, there's different types of, home builders out there, all the way from, here's our house to, extremely custom. And what I'm hearing, but no matter what, you still don't just buy a house. There's a lot to talk about: where it is, the size it is, the cost, the features, everything. And so what I'm hearing is that that's kind of how you treat disaster recovery. It's not just we do DR. Here's the price for it. It's, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what you need and find a solution that fits your company the best.
Yeah, absolutely. That's our goal.
Okay, great. So can you kind of walk us through, the process? If someone came to you and said, hey, we need help with DR, kind of walk us through what would it be like? Do you have someone to help them plan it, execute it, and then the maintenance and administration of that after? How does all that flow?
Yeah, great question. So we typically run into one of two scenarios. So I don't know if everyone knows what a BIA is, but a BIA is a business impact analysis. And this is something you can do on your own. This is something you can go to a consulting firm and have done, or there are even some templates on the internet on how to do it, and we can help you do it as well. But a business impact analysis helps you understand, and this is typically, you're working with the business to understand this, how to take the business processes in your organization that are supported by applications and technology and prioritize them, as well as the risk if those would have an availability issue. We run into companies who've already had that done, and it's sort of part of their institutional thinking already. We run into companies where that might be a new concept, or maybe they're aware of what it is, they just haven't actually had an opportunity to go and do it yet. So that's the first place we start. The byproduct of that is you end up with a pretty good understanding of what those most important, most essential business-driven or technology-driven business initiatives are that are out there. And that's where we start to build the DR plan around, because typically most people can start a conversation with the C-level or the executive team about that application, and everybody will understand. But the reality is you need to protect the whole business. So as we start with that one sort of cornerstone building block, we then start to layer all the other applications into the approach.
Okay, excellent. What about, there's a question here about, replication. What are your most common tools or systems you use to get data from the company's primary data center to your protected data center?
Yep, good question as well. So we have, certainly if you're on a hypervisor today, there are tools like Zerto that do an amazing job replicating data at the hypervisor level. So we use that a lot for virtual environments. Almost every environment we have has a pretty heavy VMware or virtual component to it. So that works really well. The other thing we run into is a lot of physical environments, and those physical environments can be x86 based, or they can not be x86 based. So typically we're taking a tool like DoubleTake into the x86 world. Sometimes we use Commvault for that. We tend to work with whatever tools they have there because they've already got a data protection technology in place to back that stuff up. Why not extend it if you can accomplish the RTO into your recovery solution and save some money? That's also the same thing we see with the non-x86 systems is there's usually a tool there backing that environment up. They may even be replicating it, just not far enough away or not fast enough. So we'll lean into that as well. And if people don't have ideas on that, we go back into our client base and say, well, this is what we did for so-and-so. Maybe this is something that would work for your legacy system as well.
Okay. So it's all very custom, really. I mean, you provide disaster recovery and you do it however it fits the customer best, really.
I think that the solution looks that way. What we deliver from a platform standpoint is very standardized. So the software that I showed you, the control panels, the views, the way you're able to manipulate the environment, that's standard. It's just, it might be, you might be moving data one way for this application, you might be moving data this way for another application based on your needs, but yet the way that you're working with our environment and the recovery process is the same.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, so you have a standard, essentially disaster recovery dashboard. I mean, it's not just like, well, here's a binder with all the instructions on how to recover, and here's the 12 different places to go to look to figure out what's going on. You have this dashboard that helps them, gain visibility that they need on a daily basis to know that everything is how it should be and to take action when it's not.
Yeah, and the testing works that way as well, and so does the playbook, which is really the heart of how you actually manage an event. It goes through that as well. It talks about the applications in terms of their priority. That's how we recover the environment. But what you'll see is there are multiple technologies typically in one environment, and it may not be just the replication. It may be how the security needs to work, that the firewall, the IPS, the VPN tunnels, and the data leakage protection device all need to be turned on before you open up public access to this particular application.
Okay. And what about RPOs and RTOs and recovery waves?
Yeah, so specifically, was that the question literally?
Well, yeah, that was the question. I mean, what I'm picturing here is, companies have different applications with different levels of criticality, so they might have some tier one applications that require, this RTO and less critical applications with longer, RTOs. How do you kind of handle that and manage that? And do you use different tools to accomplish different RTOs?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So it's typically a balance between the RTO and the cost, right? So in some cases, it's a technology barrier because you might have a really high RTO, but you can't necessarily make that RTO happen with the particular type of system that you have. So I'll give you two examples just really quickly. So we work with a health insurance company out of Seattle, and they came in and they were really excited about all the modern hypervisor-based replication. They'd seen some demos. They were super excited. And as they were working through the process, we realized that they hadn't actually included their IBM systems team in the conversation because they were worried that those folks would slow everything down. That's okay. So that was cool until we figured out that all the data warehouse was actually in the IBM environment. It wasn't on any of the virtual systems. Those all just talked to the IBM environment. So when we went and looked at that and we thought, okay, well, how are you going to do that? We realized that they actually had Commvault in their environment. They were backing it all up that way. So we started the conversation of, well, we can get you to this modern place where you have really aggressive RTO, call it, less than 2 hours, or, and that's the whole process, the RTO, not just the technology, or you can leverage what you have protect the IBM system as well, and everything will be together, but your RTO is going to be more like 24 hours. And they said for where they're at today, because this is such a huge improvement, they want to get to the sub 2-hour environment over the next year or two. But what they would get a huge improvement out of would be to leverage the investments they've already made and get a real RTO of 24 hours with a system that was hosted somewhere else. We had kind of similar but opposite scenario where we had a company come in and they said, hey, we've got about 150 virtual systems. We need to protect them all. We don't have a very big budget. So we're thinking, 3 or 4 days would be cool. Let's put it all back there. But we've got this handful of systems that we'd really like to protect Zerto with. So we're going to prioritize those a little higher. And I call that 30 or 40 VMs because all those applications were tied together. And as we started to expose to them what the situation would actually look like and how easy it would be to include all their VMs in the Zerto solution, they got pretty excited, and it turned out they could actually afford that. So they promoted everything from tier 3 up into tier 2, and now they now have a 2 to 4 hour RTO. We broke it into waves, 1 and 2, but basically some applications come back in 2 hours or less, some applications come back in 4 hours or less. So they actually got a pretty big lift up based on being able to go to a modern solution because they were all virtual.
Very nice. Yeah, I'm sure there's so many benefits to moving to a virtual infrastructure and getting rid of those physical servers if it's possible. I know it's not always possible. And a question here is about Zerto specifically. You mentioned when someone wants to use Zerto through BlueLock, do they purchase Zerto separately, or is that something they purchase through BlueLock? How's that managed?
You can do it either way. So depending on how your organization works and what your preference might be, we can provide it as part of the service. Or if you've already got Zerto licenses and maybe you thought you would do this yourself and you've changed your mind, you can certainly start using those licenses and replicate that data to us without additional cost.
Nice. A question here is about the runbook. Essentially, who maintains that, and how does BlueLock, how do you all work together?
That's a great question. So a lot of people use Iron Mountain, and people would probably initially say that the value that Iron Mountain provides is the fact that they store your data off-site. And I would argue that the greatest value Iron Mountain provides is the fact that somebody's going to show up at your door every week or every other day or however often you do it and stand there until you give them backup data, right? So BlueLock is kind of like that. We are the ones driving the process around testing, the order of operations around the DR environment, and build, development, and management of the playbook itself. We call it a playbook, by the way, because it's actually got multiple plays in it. Runbooks typically will cover the failover event. We actually cover failover for full data center, failover for partial data center, failback, all sorts of different scenarios in there other than just a basic failover event. But we manage all of that, but it's completely transparent. So as you saw in the portal, you can come in, you can get your runbook, you can log into the collaborative extranet, make changes, adjust things. So you sort of have free access to as much of it as you want, but the responsibility of driving the process is on us.
And I think that's an important differentiator about BlueLock is it's not just a technology or a data center. You all kind of are offering a complete disaster recovery advice here, as well as Runbook and those other services.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We operate it for you to the degree that you want us to.
Interesting. Nice. Okay. Well, I think that's the end of our time slot here. I really appreciate your presentation, Pat. Great insight into what BlueLock does, as well as your customers and how they have excelled using BlueLock services. So what should people do to find out more information or to get more information from BlueLock?
Yeah, so I would just go to our website, bluelock.com. There's a lot more information there, but there's also some great ways to connect to us, whether it's through Twitter, LinkedIn, or if you're after somebody specifically, or if you just want to reach out and talk to our engagement team. As you can probably tell, we take more of a consultative approach to the conversation. So if you just want to get on the phone and figure out whether we're not a fit based on what your priorities are, we're happy to guide you. And we can not only tell you what we've done for people, as you saw today, we can tell you about people who decided to take this on themselves, how that went, and a lot of them are successful with that as well. But what sort of was the tipping point to people deciding to do this as a service or not?
Excellent. Well, thanks very much, Pat. I appreciate it. And with that, let's go ahead and move to our poll questions, and then I'll announce the winner of another $500 Amazon gift card. So the next poll question here on the list is, do you plan to address disaster recovery in 2016? Honestly, if you're on this event, the answer is probably yes. You're looking to implement some sort of new DR solution, I would think, looking for some new innovations. But you may already be fine and not looking for any new solutions at this time, or maybe you have a time frame or no plans at all. So I appreciate you answering that question. And while you're doing that, I'd like to announce the next winner of the Amazon $500 gift card is Vincent Costello. Congratulations. We'll be contacting you via email to send out your gift card. So let me go ahead and close those results. And as you can see, roughly 47% have DR in place, and then 24% out there are looking for DR solutions in the next 12 months. So thanks for answering that. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next presenter, and that is Mr. Joshua Stenhouse, who's a technology evangelist at Zerto. Josh, are you there?
I'm here, David. Can you hear me well?
I can. Excellent. Let me go ahead and give you presenter control. All right, you should have that, and then you can show your screen.
Okay, just showing that now.
Excellent. I see your screen. Thanks for joining us, Josh. Take it away.
So thank you very much, David, and thank you everyone at Actual Tech Media for having us today, and great presentations from Pat and Ken. I hope you enjoyed them. I certainly I learned a lot and agreed with a lot of what was said in terms of the lessons and why you need disaster recovery and the considerations for using the cloud. And then Pat's great use cases on different companies that have successfully leveraged DR as a service and how you can possibly benefit from the same capabilities by leveraging the latest technologies in being able to replicate to the cloud. And at Zerto, we're really the glue that enables you to have this data replication into the cloud, because we provide enterprise class virtual replication and recovery solutions for both VMware and Hyper-V virtualized data centers. And Zerto revolutionized disaster recovery in virtualized environments, because before Zerto came along, in an enterprise scale environment, there was only one way to typically do it, and that was storage-based replication. So you would have two big clunking great big storage arrays where you would replicate all the LUNs and the data between them. You would obviously then have to have a second data center to put that storage array in. You'd have to match the make and model, and then you'd have the complexity of all the replication being configured on a storage and LUN basis, which didn't make sense now that you were starting to use virtualization more and more. And when you see the polls with 89% of you using VMware vSphere, there is certainly a lot of virtualization out there today. At Zerto, we revolutionized that replication by moving it up into the hypervisor and also including all of the orchestration and automation in one single solution, which removed that lock-in. So now you could replicate from any storage to any storage. You could have the replication between your own data centers or even up into the cloud. And most importantly is that it kept all the enterprise class capabilities that you had in the storage replication layer, but made it simple because you were just selecting VMs in the hypervisor, and it was now software defined. And if you look at the trend since Zerto GA'd back in 2011, all you've seen is more and more solutions moving into the hypervisor to fully leverage the benefits of virtualization, with an examples being networking, the storage. Zerto did the exact same thing for replication and recovery automation. And just a bit of backstory about myself is that if we go back to 2011, I was actually an end user where I had my own virtual infrastructure, and I had a huge challenge around disaster recovery in that I couldn't replicate the storage layer because of the overhead of snapshots. I couldn't replicate in the VM level layer because All I had was VM level replication solutions that were also using snapshots. And I came across Zerto, and when I installed it and saw it protecting my own data, it was literally the coolest thing that I had seen since virtualization and vMotion itself. So hopefully in this presentation and in the quick demo we'll give you at the end, I'll be able to show you exactly what I saw when I first saw Zerto. Zerto is an industry certified solution, both by Cisco and by the market itself. When you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant for DR as a service providers, 8 of the top 14 all use Zerto virtual replication for replicating your VMs up into a cloud data center. And I'll be honest, when you see the dashboard of BlueLock and you can see, real time what you have protected, you can see the cost of that, when you can actually recover it and the certification of that recovery, you can easily see why they're the leading Zerto provider in the visionary category. Once you lead the protection of your virtual environment with Zerto, it actually opens up a world of possibilities because you've now got hypervisor-based replication that isn't locked into the storage layer, which means that you have no lock-in. You're not locked into the hypervisor. You can use it for VMware, Hyper-V. You could switch between the two, and you can use it to replicate and protect data from any storage array. So if you're considering DR as a service, you might also be looking at all the new disruptive storage vendors and technologies that are out there and be wondering, well, I want this new storage technology, but how am I going to manage disaster recovery and replication? And with Zerto, you can protect irrespective of the storage vendor, improve the compliance and remove the risk of that protection. You can use Zerto to consolidate multiple data centers for migrations and then provision shared services on top of that. You can evolve your environment to consume the cloud in what for most people is the most logical first step, and that is disaster recovery as a service to Amazon Web Services or our managed service providers like IBM and BlueLock. And then finally, Zerto is going to enable you to simplify your environment because you're just using a single solution that is future-proof to any new hypervisor or technology that you bring into your production environment. When you look at traditional protection strategies, if you have the circumstance of a power interruption, a hardware failure, a cryptolocker virus, for example, with the outbreak of quite a few infections at hospitals you've seen today and over the last few weeks, or just the mundane day-to-day things that you see like a file deletion or a human or application error, if one of these events occurs at 5 or 6 p.m. in a working day, if all you have is a traditional backup solution, then you potentially got a huge window of data loss, which could be up to 24 hours. And for many organizations, this could represent hundreds of thousands of lost information and then data and that you've got to recreate. If you've got some sort of snapshot-based solution, then yes, you can take different points in time, but there's only so many of these you can keep, and there's only so many that you can take. So even with snapshots, you've still got a potential window of data loss and downtime. And what Zerto's replication technology is going to do is minimize the impact across the board because we keep a journal of all the changes occurring in your protected environment, going back to increments in seconds up to 2 weeks in the past. And what this allows is that in the event of that incident of 5 or 6 p.m. in a working day, Zerto allows you to rewind and recover from any point in time down to the second before the incident occurred. And whether it's the entire data center or site, maybe all the servers were infected and encrypted, maybe it's just an individual application. So you had a faulty application upgrade and you need to rewind that app. It could be individual virtual machines within an application, or even the files within that protected virtual machine, so any file system object. No matter what you need to recover, Zerto's replication technology is going to allow you to rewind and pull that out from the replicated data wherever that might sit and minimize that impact. Zerto's solution is completely software based. There's no physical appliances. There's no hardware to configure. It's just software that you download from Zerto.com and you can install it in your virtual environment in minutes. And because it's software based, this is how the same Zerto software can protect 10 or 15 VMs up to some of our large enterprise and cloud environments that have thousands of virtual machines. It's always on replication. There's no scheduling. You just select the VMs to protect, And then we maintain the replication and protection with enterprise class features such as consistency groupings and data loss and RPOs in seconds. You have a single dashboard interface to view the visibility of that and status of that protection, but also it allows you to drive the recovery, and together with it being always on replication, showing you that it's protected, giving you the interface to drive that recovery yourself and see the status of that recovery, it gives the assurance that you know you can recover. And Zerto is technology agnostic in that it doesn't matter what version of vSphere that you're running, you can use multiple versions, or you can use vSphere or Hyper-V, any storage layer, and with one strategic platform and no lock-in, you can replicate using Zerto in your private cloud. If you want to do it yourself, you can use Zerto to drive that. You can use Zerto to replicate between your satellite offices, as I mentioned, for both migrations, and we also support cross-hypervisor replication, so you can go from Hyper-V 2012 R2 to vSphere and vice versa. And the cool thing there is that if you invest in Zerto today, and today you're using vSphere, not many people out there can say in 3 to 5 years' time that you still might be using VMware as your main hypervisor. With Zerto, not only can you migrate to that new hypervisor in the future, you can then reuse the license to protect after. And as Pat mentioned, you can reuse that license to then go from doing it yourself to leveraging the cloud. And we have over 200 Zerto cloud service providers who use our software to provide both a self-service and a managed DR as a service offering. And we also support replication into the public cloud to Amazon Web Services. If you look at the key reasons why you might consider DR as a service, it can be pretty obvious when you start to break down what are all the things that you've got to manage and pay for simply to have a DR site running. And this was very evident to me last week. I was on the West Coast. I was in a huge data center in Orange County. And being in this huge data center and seeing everything that had to be done just to keep the lights on was pretty staggering. And when you see this and you see customers all over the world trying to do this themselves, it really becomes apparent of the cost savings and the simplicity and the flexibility of leveraging the cloud as a DR target. Because yes, you want to keep all your data on premise, so you've got data sovereignty, you're managing the access, you've got low latency, you've got the performance. But for DR sites, it really does start to beg the question that now we've got our cloud services to the stage that they're at, that it really doesn't make sense anymore for a lot of customers out there. And with Zerto, we give you the option of both. If you still want to do it yourself, you can. And if you want to use the same software and leverage your cloud, you can also do that too. And the next question might be, well, which cloud do I use and which solution? And so we can break this down reasonably simply for you, that whether you're using Zerto on-premise, Zerto to the ZCE, which is our cloud ecosystem, all the cloud providers, or Zerto to Amazon Web Services, the key difference is that if you're using it on-premise, then you're going to need a physical DR site. But where it starts to break out in a few key differentiators is this managed service aspect. If you want a managed service, like Pat said and the guys at BlueLock, where you've got an expert team to manage that failover process, to manage that testing for you, then a Zerto Cloud Ecosystem Partner is the only service that's going to give you that capability and that white glove service. Also, if you want to fail over and have the recovery time in minutes and be able to fail the data back out of the public cloud or the cloud service, sorry, and have that just as a single checkbox, then you need a Zerto Cloud Ecosystem Partner. But what I found personally in Zerto support for Amazon Web Services is that you can tier the protection. If you have some low tier applications, you just want a copy of the data offsite, Amazon Web Services is a great way to get that data offsite at a very cheap public commodity cost, but it also gives you a great way to trial out disaster recovery as a service, get used to this idea of failing over to the cloud, and then when you're ready to consume a enterprise class managed service with SLAs, with guarantees of recovery, then you're ready to go to a Zerto cloud service provider and have that conversation because you've already validated out the technology, now you want the service. If we take a look at how Zerto works, it's very, very simple. You install the Zerto Manager software in your environment. It installs in minutes. You can install it in multiple sites. There's no downtime. There's no impact. The first component is a Zerto Virtual Manager, which is just a .NET installer that you put in a VM that links into your vCenter or your System Center if you're running a Hyper-V site. The next thing you deploy is our scale-out hypervisor-based replication appliance technology. These are deployed one per hypervisor host, so that as you move the protected VMs between the hosts, Zerto can carry on replicating. And it's scale out in that by having one per host, this is how Zerto can protect the small environments to the very large, because you simply have more replication appliances and horsepower. They have built-in compression of the replication traffic. It's an LZ4 algorithm, usually 60% plus compression rates. You can throttle the replication traffic over working hours, and it has built-in resiliency to WAN outages. So if the link goes down for any period, Zerto is only going to replicate the most recently changed blocks when the link is restored. The replication itself is just replicating VM block level changes from the hypervisor. So it's continuous replication, giving you data loss and RPO of just seconds with no snapshots, no performance impact in the protected VMs, no storage overhead in your production site, and most importantly, no scheduling. You don't have to log in every morning and check, did last night's job run? With Zerto, you're just selecting those VMs, always on continuous replication, and if nothing is changing, nothing is being replicated, and as the data is changing, it's being compressed and just trickles over to the recovery site, meaning that your recovery site data is just seconds of lag behind production. And then in the recovery site is where we store all of the replica VMs and the journaling data, so it's stored in the cloud, allowing you to use any storage in production, free up space potentially of existing solutions that you might be using, and the replication itself is going to be over a VPN MPLS connection provided by that cloud provider, and the minimum WAN link required is a 5 meg symmetric link. Another key concept in Zerto is how we enable the protection of enterprise applications. And just to give you a sample enterprise application architecture, it might consist of a firewall that is then sending traffic to load balancers, which balance the traffic to the front end of the app, which might be multiple web servers. That might be storing some files on redundant file system VMs, some index servers for maintaining search data and keeping the application responsive. And then finally, you might have some big meaty database servers on the back end. And each of these VMs are all talking to each other. And this is just a 12 VM application. We have some customers who protect applications way bigger than this. And when you have these multi-VM applications, a key consideration is how do you protect this and recover it consistently? And with storage replication, it was pretty simple to do in a physical world because you were just protecting and replicating the LUN. But when you moved to virtualization, you had VMs and virtual disks. So you had to make sure all the VMs were on the correct LUN to have that consistent replication, because you'd snap the LUN and then recover all the VMs from the same point in time together. At Zerto, we took that LUN consistency group and we evolved it into what we call a virtual protection group. This gives you simple, scalable protection and recovery of the VMs, not the underlying LUNs. So you can recover the entire multi-VM application stack together from the exact same point in time just a few seconds in the past. And this is for both the real-time recovery from a few seconds ago, point-in-time recovery rewinding back in time. We maintain the right order fidelity of all the changes in the environment, and you can schedule and insert application consistent points in time on any frequency you define. And the cool thing with Zerto is that because we're not using snapshots, you can quite often do this on a much higher frequency with Zerto because there's no stun of the snapshot in the quiesce process. You can prioritize the replication traffic of different applications depending on their tier. You can precede the initial synchronization of the data. So if you wanted to replicate 50 terabytes to BlueLock and you don't necessarily want to send that across the wire, then they can arrange to restore a backup in the cloud data center and just send the changes. And once you protected the VMs in these protection groups, the day-to-day changes that happen in your virtual environment, moving the VMs around, are not going to break the replication. So vMotion, storage vMotions, HA failovers, adding, removing, resizing disks, all those things will continue to work. No change needed in Zerto. Zerto removes the risk from a recovery process because it's very, very simple. If you have that disaster event, step one, you click failover. Step two, you select the applications. It can be one, all, or a subset. Step 3, you verify the settings for recovery. And step 4, you start the failover. And sorry, I missed one point there. When we look at the different settings for recovery, selecting the point in time to actually fail over to is as simple as this checkbox here. So in those 4 simple steps, that is all it takes to initiate the disaster recovery with Zerto. And how this looks on the back end is Zerto is simply going to register the VMs in the inventory in the target site, whether it's your own hypervisor or the cloud. We'll do boot ordering, re-IP addressing if you need that, run any custom scripts. And we also allow you to validate that point in time works. And if it doesn't work, you can rewind out of that and select a different point in time. You can do isolated failover testing to bubble networks to ensure that you can recover the data with no impact in production. You can use Zerto for migrations. Click to move. We move all the data in minutes with the data seconds of lag behind production. And failback is just a single checkbox where we automatically reverse the replication and send just the changes back to your production site. The only caveat being is that if you are using Zerto to replicate into the public cloud, as you know, Amazon love to make it easy to get data in, not quite as easy when you want to get data out. So you can manually export the data from Amazon, installing a VMware converter tool, but it's not included in the software. And if you want automated failback configuration and the benefits of DR as a service, then that is where we do recommend our cloud providers like BlueLock that you heard from earlier. Here we have the Zerto dashboard, gives you a real-time overview of the environment, of your RPOs, the status of the protection against the SLAs that you've defined. It's a single solution, excuse me, in that it doesn't matter whether you're using VMware or Hyper-V, you'll get the exact same interface here. You can configure role-based access control, and you can automate everything via the REST API. And this is where you can also drive your own DR test reporting from your local site. And just to give you an example of a report produced from Zerto itself, this allows you to prove the compliance and remove the risk for all the different testing regulations that you might have. At this point, I'd like to switch across and just show you a very quick demonstration of exactly what I've been talking about. And what you'll see in my environment here, I'll just wait for this to load, is I have my dashboard showing that I have 24 VMs protected in 15 consistency groups, protecting 50 terabytes of data, and the real-time replication, no snapshots, no performance impact, and a recovery point objective of seconds. And this is the same RPO that you would see whether it's between your own 2 data centers or up into a cloud provider. We have compression of the changes as they're occurring over the IP link, which is 80% plus in this environment. And I can see a breakdown on a per protection group basis where you can send different protection groups to different target locations. I could have some protection groups going up into my cloud provider, some protection groups going locally within the same data center. Zerto does support replication within a vCenter as well. The choice is completely up to you. One feature that I didn't go into in the presentation that I do want to show you quickly right now is we mentioned Zerto being able to drive file level recovery, and this is actually a new feature in Zerto 4.5. And if you look at disaster recovery, yes, there are many different things that can cause a disaster event, but what's more than likely going to be a key use case or more common occurrence is users deleting data or corrupt databases. And if Zerto's got all of this data in the recovery site and you've gone to the trouble of getting this DR solution, just having it sat there for a disaster is a bit of a waste. So what we added is this new file level restore feature where you simply click restore file, select the virtual machine you want to restore the data from, select the point in time before the data was deleted. You can then mount the disk, and the disk is mounted using the replicated data in the recovery site with no impact in production whatsoever. And you can now browse the file system of that protected VM, and you can pull out that file, that folder from just seconds before it was deleted. So rather than IT having to be the bad guys when, in this example, poor Andy comes to IT at 5 p.m. and says, I've deleted my home folder, and IT says, oh, I'm really sorry, we've got to go to last night's backup and you've lost it and you've got to recreate that data. You can use this disaster recovery as a service to pull that file or document out from seconds before it was deleted. And this is just downloaded through your browser session. So you can put this file back in the original location, compress it as a zip, and all the data is compressed over the wire, send it over an email. the power and the choice is completely with you, and you can really start to leverage Zerto and your cloud provider on a daily basis for this very powerful capability. So now we'll just switch back to the presentation, and I'd like to pass it back to David and open it up to Q&A. But next steps, I encourage everyone, go to Zerto.com, click to get a trial, and any vSphere or Hyper-V admin can have Zerto installed in 10-15 minutes. You can have VMs replicating within the hour. You can start by testing it out within your own data center. Just get used to how the replication works, get used to the flexibility of replicating in the hypervisor consistently with all these features. You can maybe test it out into the cloud as well. And when you're happy with that, then you can consider whether you want to do it yourself, whether you want to use a cloud provider and not need a DR site. As well as the trial, tweet us at Zerto Corp, at Joshua Stenhouse, and feel free to also join a Zerto webinar. And there's also the handout available in the GoToWebinar that you can download a copy of all these slides.
Excellent presentation, Josh. Thanks so much. We do have quite a few questions here from the audience. We've got a few minutes here, left in our slotted event schedule. So I guess let me run through them as quickly as I can. First, I want to say I love the file level restore. I have never seen that feature before, and that was really cool. So we're going to do a Q&A here, and then I've got a poll question for the audience. We'll announce the final $500 Amazon gift card, and I'll thank you for attending. So, Josh, I noticed there you've got the software. They can just use Zerto replication themselves between their own, company locations, or they can go through a Zerto cloud service provider, or they can use Amazon Web Services. Did I get kind of the different options there correct?
Yeah, that's totally correct. And the interesting thing that we see with that is we have lots of customers who buy Zerto today and they're using it for on-prem replication between their own two data centers. But one of the key reasons they bought Zerto was that they can't say for sure that in a year or 2 years' time they're going to continue to do that. So they're leveraging it today and then tomorrow for the ability to migrate to the cloud. And Pat's right that we have lots of customers who bought Zerto 3 years ago and are now switching to the cloud provider the next time the storage or the server refresh comes up.
Excellent, excellent. So if they went through a Zerto cloud service provider here, they're asking, do they license Zerto like just on their side, or do they buy Zerto through the cloud service provider, or how does that relationship work?
It works both ways. So we have customers who can buy Zerto outright, and it's a license per VM, and then they can reuse that license to go up into the cloud. And when you go up into the cloud, you're still gonna, have a custom quote from that cloud provider depending on the VM count and the storage and all the services around it. But the Zerto license itself and how you get that data, you can either buy it outright, use it yourself, or you can include that in the service and the monthly cost from the cloud provider that you're going to.
Okay. And what would you say, like cloud service providers or the Zerto cloud service providers provide Zerto customers on top of just doing it themselves or sending their data to Amazon?
I'd say it's the expertise and the managed service in that, just getting a copy of the virtual machines consistently across to the recovery site is what Zerto handles, and we are the best technology for doing that. But once you've done that, how do you then verify that all the services have come online? How do you build the runbooks and make sure that everything is protected with the correct SLAs and maintain that protection? And most importantly, that if it gets to the point where a building is being evacuated and IT themselves are being kicked out the building, who's going to actually initiate and manage and verify that failover for you? And that's where our managed service providers come in, because they're going to give you the complete total service. And finally, when you're talking about enterprise accounts, it's not good enough to just say, I've got a copy in the cloud, and if I've got a problem, I can call a cloud provider and hope that they'll fix it. You need SLAs, you need a contract in place and guarantees when you're going to switch this service. And again, that's where you should leverage a Zerto cloud service provider.
Right. Yeah, so like an auditor or a bank, they're not going to be happy with an answer of, oh, we put it in the cloud, right? They need a little bit more than that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So there's a question here about, what sort of bandwidth or link is necessary they're asking about 10-second RPOs specifically. But I mean, I don't know if you can answer that, but how does someone estimate the bandwidth or know what bandwidth they need?
So we do have one sizing tools available on the website. You can get them on the forum as well. And also our cloud providers will give you, but it is a common question because as soon as you say RPOs in seconds, everybody gets concerned on bandwidth. But it's very simple. All you have to do is take the write rate of your protected VMs, you put it in Zerto's one sizing tool, we add in our compression, and we'll tell you the recommended link size, but I can tell you minimum link of 5 meg, and any link that you're doing storage replication on today, I guarantee Zerto is going to give you a lower RPO and use less bandwidth on that link because of the continuous replication and the compression of the change blocks as they're changing in production and then trickling across to the DR side.
Okay, awesome. Another question here is about like dedupe and compression. Is that being used?
So we compress the replication traffic. We don't do any deduplication ourselves of the traffic because we're maintaining the write order fidelity down to the second, or every few seconds, sorry. And we don't dedupe the virtual disks themselves in the DR site just because we wouldn't be able to guarantee full failover performance. But we do have different cloud providers who might leverage deduplicated storage, or you can use Zerto in your own 2 data centers and put those virtual disks in the DR site on dedupe storage as well.
Got it. Okay. And I know we're starting to run out of time here, so I guess I'll make this the last question. What's the typical installation process? I mean, are there agents? Is there anything to, do you have to reboot the host, or what's required?
So it's just download the trial, install the manager that gives you the dashboard interface. You deploy the replication appliances, so the OVF appliances included with that installer from the management interface. They're on each hypervisor host. There's no downtime, no disruption to any VMs. And like I said, any VMware or Hyper-V admin can have this installed in minutes.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your presentation. For more information or to download the trial, visit zerto.com/trial. Thanks a lot, Josh, for joining us.
Thank you, David.
All right. So with that, let's go ahead and I'm going to show my screen here. We're going to do a quick poll question. And while that poll question, actually 2 poll questions are up, I'm going to find the winner here of the final $500 Amazon gift card. And the question here is about your biggest DR challenges. Is it what keeps you up at night about DR? How are we going to do it? What are the challenges? And so while that question is up on the screen, the winner of the Amazon gift card is Thomas Henkel. We'll be reaching out to you via email to deliver your gift card. So if I share those results, you can see budget is a big concern with DR, not 100% virtualized. Really, there's concerns kind of all over the board here. A lot of concerns around just accomplishing it. How are we going to get it done? And then last question here before we wrap up the event, and that is a quick yes or no. Do you feel more educated about DR solutions after today's event? All right, so with that, just a quick reminder, we have another event coming up on the 30th of this month. It is a Hyperconvergence MegaCast. Watch your email for an invitation. I hope you'll join us. We've got 6 Hyperconvergence vendors to share their stories and tons of prizes to announce. All right, so you can see 95% said yes, they feel more educated. Awesome. All right, that's a wrap for the first ever Disaster Recovery as a Service EcoCast. We've got more EcoCast events coming up, more MegaCast events coming up. I hope you'll join us. I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you have a great day.